So a few months ago, I went to Cancun. As soon as I walked outside of the airport, I was met by at least 60 locals. And these locals were trying to sell me everything from tequila to massages to taxi cabs. They were ready for anyone who stepped out of that airport because they knew that you were only coming to Cancun for one reason, to vacation. And if you're vacationing, you have a little extra money to spend. So they realized that we can make our economy by selling to tourists. And that's the inspiration for today's small talk. I'm Brent Craig, a marketing expert. I've been doing marketing for 10 years, ran a lot of successful companies, and this podcast, Plug and Profits, is centered around me helping small businesses automate their tasks, use AI to make more money, and how to create scalable marketing practices. So today's small talk is really about how to sell when you live in a tourist. And this is specific for my New Orleans people because I'm from New Orleans, one of the most popular tourist destinations in the world. And when I go into my communities, the Black community specifically, I see that a lot of us don't know how to leverage New Orleans to build a scalable business. So that's what today's talk is going to be about. How do we as New Orleanians package ourselves? How do we reposition ourselves so that we're not selling internally to each other, but we're positioning ourselves to sell externally when people come into our city? And honestly, in Cancun, some of it was a little pushy. People even like pulled on my shirt a couple of times, and I had to kind of, brush them to the side a little bit because it was just a little too pushy. And we don't have to get that pushy, but we do have to understand some of these fundamental concepts because just like Cancun, New Orleans thrives on tourism. And while I feel like a lot of Uptown and French Quarter neighbors understand this, I think a lot of our Black communities need to figure out how to position themselves to sell to tourists. Because the reality is that the average tourist that's on a budget in New Orleans spends around $170 per night. If you're not on a budget, you're spending around $384 a night. And if you are just coming down there to do luxury, you're literally spending over $900 per day. So imagine if you as a business owner could capture $5, $10 from every tourist that came into New Orleans. You would have no need to sell to anyone locally. But how do you make your business more appealing to people who are traveling into New Orleans? You make it more New Orleans. I was at a dinner yesterday and I made this point that New Orleans is kind of like a theme park. Every time you get off of that airplane and you come into New Orleans, it's like you're coming into Disney World. There's entertainment, there's food, there's mascots, the whole 9 yards. But how do we as business owners position ourselves to where they would want to stop at our business or our activation when they're coming to New Orleans land, right? So that's what we're going to talk about. How do we get your business in a position to where you can make more money from tourists? So the first thing that I want to talk about is the hustle culture difference. When I went to Cancun, it was hustle. We talking everybody reaching out, trying to sell you something. It was a little pushy, like I mentioned earlier, but it was the hustle culture was different. They understood that if you want to make money in a tourist economy, you have to capture the money that's coming in. You have to get outside capital because as we all know, New Orleans ain't the richest place in the world. They also built systems. So I would see the taxis, we see the alcohol, there's like the massages. Everything is built up in a systemic pipeline to where you're kind of just funneling right into it. And when it comes to building systems, this is how you really capture that value. If we're just going out willy-nilly trying to sell to anyone, no real system, no real strategy, we won't even have a way for us to measure our own success. So the difference between New Orleans is that we kind of chill, like laissez-faire, we kind of relax. So it's not that much hustle culture in us to go out and find a deal. We kind of wait for people to look for us instead of going out and being proactive in how we source deal flow, how we get on clients, and how we make ourselves appealing to tourists. And the main point that I want to mention is that most New Orleans businesses in the Black community are selling to other locals. When we ain't got no money like that. The people who got the money, they come here every week ready to spend it, but we're not positioning ourselves in order to capture that value. We think that we can build successful businesses by selling to other business owners. And now we're literally making our businesses communicate to other locals when the business should be communicating to people who come down here. So I want to use Larry Morrow as a good example. He's built this big restaurant portfolio. And one thing that you see when people come into town is they want to go experience all of Larry's different spots, whether it's Shang Chong or whether it's Morrow Steak or Morrow's or Treehouse. Tourists come to New Orleans. A big bulk of Black tourists come to New Orleans just to spend money with Larry Morrow. And that's because he positioned himself as a destination, not just a regular business. It's almost like an attraction. And when you win in New Orleans, due to New Orleans being a satellite city where everyone knows about it, everyone comes here, you pretty much win everywhere. And that's outside of the fact that we're a tourist city, but that also has a lot to do with the New Orleans diaspora, where every few or so years we have a hurricane that sends our people all across America. So we have footholds in pretty much every state in America simply because of hurricane. So that means we have marketers, people who are advocating for the brand of New Orleans within their home states, so that when people come down, they're ready to take something back, to either show their friend who they know from New Orleans, or to either show their parents, because New Orleans is just that popular. A big issue with New Orleans companies, and I like to use this metaphor, is we like to sell gumbo to people who have a pot at home. And when you kind of think about that, you realize that we should be packaging things for people outside of New Orleans, not just people who are our peers, because they can make their own culture. They're also from here. Tourism is the #1 economic driver in New Orleans. But for small businesses, they still post like it's like a neighborhood shop, not really a destination or an attraction. And the easiest thing about being a business in New Orleans is you do not have to reinvent the wheel. We pretty much have the entire brand anchor already because we're from New Orleans. So we know what people want to see when they come down here. They care about music, they care about food, they care about fun. Spirituality has a big hold in New Orleans as well. So these different pillars are what we should be leaning on when we're trying to brand our businesses. And how do we do that? We do that by using storytelling. So storytelling is a big angle in New Orleans. You see what Disney did with The Princess and the Frog. That ride can be bringing in 50 to $100 million because Disney even understands the value of New Orleans as a brand or as an intellectual property. And the beauty of New Orleans is that it's not owned by anyone. So you don't need to get any permission from anyone to sell something with the word New Orleans on it. And I think that's one of the biggest strategic advantages we have being from New Orleans, because we can sell New Orleans without having to pay anyone because we already pay taxes. So storytelling is a big thing. Then we also have to offer tangible experiences. People come to New Orleans to experience things. What is going on physically that I can go partake in, that I can go spend my money on? So tangible experiences is also a big thing. And one of the biggest issues with New Orleans companies is that they do not understand data collection. When someone buys from you and they give you their email, they give you their phone number, this is valuable data. You can sell things to them after they go home if you have a great retargeting and data campaign. So things like storytelling, offering tangible experiences, collecting data, these are the things that our businesses need to adopt so that we can be more appealing to tourists and we can drive more revenue when they come in town. And I'm not saying New Orleans needs to copy Cancun. The Cancun thing really taught me that there are places where the locals understand where the money comes from. So there's this perception in New Orleans where we feel we only have to sell to each other. When we have the people, like I said, in Uptown and the French Quarter, they do not sell anything to each other. They sell everything to tourists. So as a business owner, one thing that I would say as far as advice is, how do you make your business more New Orleans? If you have a barbershop, how do you make that barbershop more New Orleans? If you have a coffee shop, how do you make that coffee shop more New Orleans? The most New Orleans coffee shop in the city. Because if you have the most New Orleans coffee shop in the city and everyone else knows that, they're going to have to come to your establishment in order to get that authentic experience. When it comes to music, we have people that sell different cuisines like po' boys and oysters. You need to figure out how do you make it the most New Orleans without coming off as inauthentic, because the people who are coming in town, they want something real. They're not coming here because they want some manufactured fake New Orleans that we see often are the ones that are making actual money from the tourists. They come because they want to experience natural, authentic New Orleans. So you really don't even have to try. Just be yourself and let that show through your actual business. Because the reality is that the second that you start appealing to tourists, you can charge more, you can run more ads, so you get a wider spread of ads because you don't have to just run ads in New Orleans anymore. And you get people that could advocate for you outside of the border. So when their friends come to New Orleans, they're also going to want to experience you. So we hear all this talk about the culture. It's hard to sell. People are selling out, et cetera, et cetera. But if we don't figure out how to sell our own culture, someone else is going to sell it for us. And we've seen that time and time again. For example, even with Mardi Gras, New Orleans is one of the only cities where we have something as big as Mardi Gras, where the float riders are the actual talent, but you have to pay to ride on a float. It doesn't make sense. Like, how am I the talent and I'm paying to be the talent? New Orleans is one of the few places that does that. And New Orleans makes around $2 billion during Mardi Gras. So where's the attention for that? Like, are we going to keep paying to become the talent so that we can make the city money so that we can still go home and be starving? Like, we really have to figure out how New Orleans works and then tailor our business models and just marketing mindsets to making it long term. So to end this video off, I just want to go over a quick few rapid fire tips. And the first one is, if it looks like New Orleans, it sells like New Orleans. So make your brand feel like New Orleans more. And when people come to New Orleans, they're going to want to buy what you're selling. Tourists buy memories, not products. Think about New Orleans as an amusement park. When you get down here, it's an amusement park. How can you sell someone an experience? Because people don't forget experiences. Number 3, your Instagram should look like a block party and not a brochure. People don't want to be sold things. They want to sell themselves on things. So if you give them the tools to help them do that, which is visuals, music, things that they respond well to, then they would sell themselves on your service and you'd save yourself marketing labor costs. Collect your data like you collect beads. If someone buys from you, you should have a database that's secure, that has all of that information, because you'll be able to talk to them for the rest of your life. Another one is that your story is your strongest marketing asset. Us being from New Orleans, we have stories for days. I was speaking to someone yesterday from Chicago who came down to New Orleans to do film work, and they were just shocked at how much stories New Orleans has, and also shocked about how much New Orleans locals don't care about it. Because you may see a streetcar and you think it's just the most magical thing, but we see it and we think it's just a regular Tuesday. So really understand where you are and the leverage that you have as a New Orleans person, or wherever you live that's a popular tourist destination. And the last point that I want to make is, never assume that locals are your only market, especially in New Orleans. We're one of the few cities that are blessed to be a tourist destination, meaning that our businesses have a strategic advantage to make more money than our city limits will allow us to make. All we have to do is tap into it. I'm Brent Craig. Thank y'all for this episode of Plug and Profits. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. Tell me what other marketing tips y'all would want. I'm also going to get more into automation next week. So thank you so much. Like and subscribe, and I'll see y'all soon.